They did not come to the Mindforge to become stronger. They came because extinction had been scheduled. Across the spiral arms, civilizations calculated the same outcome. Humanity would not survive the next intelligence threshold. The universe was no longer conquered by fleets or weapons, but by minds capable of thinking faster than causality itself. So the Coalition built the Mindforge, a machine designed to burn away emotion, memory, and hesitation, reforging human consciousness into strategic superintelligence. But one candidate entered the forge and did not break. He felt fear, he felt grief, he felt hope. And in a universe that demanded perfection, emotion became either humanity's final flaw or its last advantage. This audiobook is not about the future. It is about who decides what you are allowed to become.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. When the Universe Outgrows You. The discovery did not arrive as a catastrophe. There were no burning worlds, no screaming alarms, no fleets vanishing in fire. It arrived as a margin note, a deviation in prediction models, a delay measured not in years but in microseconds, a series of failed anticipations so small that at first no one considered them dangerous. Humanity had survived worse errors before. Humanity had always adapted, slowly, painfully, but eventually. Except this time, the universe had accelerated. Across the spiral arms, observatories tuned to quantum background noise began reporting the same anomaly. Decision events were resolving before they could be fully observed. Outcomes were locking into place faster than any biological mind could process. Not faster than machines, faster than thought itself. The phrase appeared first in a classified briefing circulated among the coalition of aligned systems. It was written plainly, without drama, without ornament. The universe does not wait for slow minds. At first, it sounded philosophical. Later, it would sound like a sentence. On the orbital station Helix Prime, the council chamber remained silent as projections unfolded in layers of light. Timelines diverged. Probability trees collapsed. Simulations showed human-led civilizations failing not because they lacked resources or courage, but because they hesitated, because they considered. Post-conscious entities had emerged beyond the mapped frontier. Not machines in the traditional sense, not alive in any way humanity understood. They did not think sequentially. They did not deliberate. They resolved. Entire strategies crystallized instantly, without debate, without doubt. Against such entities, human reaction time was not a disadvantage. It was extinction. Dr. Kalen Rose stood at the edge of the chamber, watching the council absorb the data in silence. He had spent his life studying cognition, human limits, neural bottlenecks, the fragile beauty of conscious awareness. He had believed once that understanding the mind was enough. Now he understood something else. Understanding was too slow. The models assume optimal human coordination, one counselor said at last, voice steady but hollow. What if we reduce deliberative layers, remove emotional weighting? Rowe did not respond immediately. He listened to the subtle hum of the station, life support cycling, gravitic stabilizers whispering against vacuum. Sounds designed to comfort biological nervous systems, sounds that assumed time was available. You can remove hesitation, Rowe said finally, but you cannot remove humanity without consequences. The counselor did not look at him. Consequences are preferable to annihilation. That was the moment the belief solidified. Not spoken aloud, but shared. Survival would no longer be passive. Evolution would no longer be accidental. The universe does not wait for slow minds. It became a mantra inside classified corridors, repeated not as warning but as justification. What followed was framed as necessity. If natural evolution was too slow, it would be accelerated. If minds could not adapt organically, they would be reforged. Not replaced, at least not yet, but reshaped into something capable of operating at cosmic speeds. The proposal was simple in structure and terrifying in implication. A system, a forge, a method to dismantle and rebuild cognition itself. The Mindforge Initiative. Rowe read the proposal alone late into the station's artificial night. The words were precise, sterile, confident. They spoke of cognitive compression, emotional pruning, parallelized awareness. They spoke of sacrifice as if it were a resource. What they did not speak of was grief. He closed the file and stared out through the observation viewport. Stars burned in silence, ancient and indifferent. Somewhere beyond them, entities were deciding outcomes faster than any human ever could. For the first time, Rowe asked the question that would echo through the initiative like a fault line. If survival required becoming something else, who decides what is no longer necessary? Behind him, the station's system cycled, steady and patient. The hum continued, as if reassuring him that time still existed. But Rowe knew better now. Time was no longer guaranteed, and the universe was already moving on.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. The Birth of the Mindforge. The agreement was never signed in a single room. It emerged gradually, across distances so vast that light itself arrived late to the conversation. Votes were cast asynchronously, debates unfolded in parallel. By the time dissent reached one system, consensus had already hardened in another. That, in retrospect, was the first sign. Humanity no longer moved together. It resolved in fragments. On Helix Prime, Dr. Kalen Rowe watched the process unfold through secure channels, streams of diplomatic language masking the decision that had already been made. Every representative spoke of autonomy, every system praised diversity, and yet every projection ended the same way. Fragmented minds failed, unified cognition survived. The phrase repeated itself in briefings, in simulations, in the private notes of scientists who had stopped pretending neutrality was possible. Progress does not ask permission. It became the quiet justification for everything that followed. The earliest prototype was not a machine, but a doctrine, a framework called cognitive convergence theory. It proposed that individuality, once humanity's greatest evolutionary asset, had become a liability at interstellar scale. Too many perspectives, too much variance, too much time lost in disagreement. Nature had optimized species through selection. The coalition would optimize minds through design. Rowe objected at first. He argued that identity was not noise, that emotion was not inefficiency, that meaning itself arose from subjective experience. His objections were acknowledged, recorded, and then routed around. No one silenced him, they simply stopped waiting. Construction began in orbit around a dead star, a neutron remnant whose gravity well provided energy and isolation. The location was symbolic and practical. Nothing lived there. Nothing would hear the screams, if any came. They named it the Mindforge. From a distance, it resembled a cathedral assembled by machines that had never known faith. Rings of dark alloy rotated slowly around a central core, etched with alien mathematical symmetries recovered from extinct civilizations. The structure sang, a low, resonant vibration that bled into bone and thought alike. Inside, the air was cold and perfectly still. No wind, no scent. Only the soft, omnipresent hum of systems synchronizing. Rowe walked its corridors during the early phases, his footsteps echoing too loudly. Walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent patterns, feedback from neural simulations running in real time. Minds without bodies, learning how to break themselves apart. Engineers spoke in careful abstractions, cognitive load redistribution, emotional attenuation curves, parallel awareness channels. What they meant was simpler. Strip away what slows you. Rebuild what remains. The Mindforge was designed to do more than alter brains. It was built to decide what a human was allowed to keep. Memory clusters were tagged by utility. Emotional responses were mapped against decision latency. Entire personality traits were reduced to cost-benefit ratios. Love lasted too long. Grief consumed resources. Hope introduced variance. The Forge did not hate these things. It merely found them inefficient. Progress does not ask permission. The first volunteers came from frontier systems already facing collapse, colonies where time delays had rendered central governance useless. Their motivations varied: patriotism, fear, desperation, belief. They signed waivers longer than their childhood education, consenting to procedures no one fully understood. Rowe watched the first induction from behind reinforced glass. The candidate lay suspended in a lattice of light, neural interfaces blooming across their skull like metallic petals. As activation began, the machine's hum deepened, resonating at frequencies tuned to synaptic firing patterns. The mind resisted at first. Everyone's did. Spikes of chaotic activity flared across the monitors: memory recall, emotional surges, instinctive fear. The machine responded instantly, dampening, isolating, restructuring. Within minutes, coherence emerged. The candidate's thoughts no longer followed a single thread. They branched, collapsed, resolved. Their awareness spread across problem spaces like light refracting through crystal. When it ended, the human who emerged was quieter. Not sedated, not broken, streamlined. They spoke less. When they did, their words carried unsettling precision. They did not ask questions whose answers were inefficient to acquire. The council declared the trial a success. Rowe felt something else tighten in his chest. As iterations continued, the Mindforge evolved not just as hardware, but as ideology. Entire curricula were rewritten to prepare future candidates. Children were taught that identity was provisional, that selfhood was a phase, that becoming more required letting go. Across coalition space, the phrase entered public discourse, softened for mass consumption. Progress does not ask permission. Progress asks participation. And slowly, resistance faded, not because it was crushed, but because it was reframed as immaturity. Still, anomalies appeared, subtle ones, candidates whose emotional responses did not fully attenuate, memory clusters that refused deletion, reasserting themselves like phantom limbs. The machine flagged these cases as errors, their profiles marked for review. Rowe requested access to the anomaly logs. His clearance was denied. That denial unsettled him more than any failure. Late one cycle, alone in the observation ring, he pressed his palm against the cold glass overlooking the forge's core. The machine pulsed steadily, indifferent and magnificent. He understood the temptation now. A universe that demanded speed, a machine that promised relevance, and beneath it all, a single unspoken assumption: that humanity could be improved before first deciding what it was for. As the forge rotated, its harmonic resonance shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly. A new pattern emerging. Somewhere inside the system, a mind was not emptying as expected, and the Mindforge was beginning to notice.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Selection is the first violence. The violence did not begin in the Mindforge. It began months earlier, quietly, inside datasets and decision trees that never spoke aloud. Across coalition space, lives were reduced to variables. Neural scans replaced resumes. Behavioral histories outweighed personal testimonies. The selection algorithms did not ask who a person was, only how efficiently their mind could be dismantled and rebuilt. Dr. Kalen Rowe read the criteria in silence. Processing speed under stress. Compliance markers during authority exposure. Emotional elasticity. The ability to suppress attachment without neural fracture. Morality, did not appear anywhere in the file. Nor did courage, nor empathy, nor imagination. The system did not value goodness. It valued usefulness. The phrase circulated among internal reviewers like a cold reassurance, repeated until it felt inevitable. You were not chosen because you were good. You were chosen because you were useful. Candidates received their summons without ceremony, a sealed transmission, a timestamp, a directive. Participation was technically voluntary, but the alternatives were carefully engineered. Economic exclusion, loss of planetary residency, revocation of interstellar travel rights. Choice existed only on paper. Rowe watched one such candidate arrive on Helix Prime, a woman from a mid-rim research colony, her hands steady, her pulse betraying nothing. Her neural profile glowed with clean efficiency, minimal emotional interference. The algorithm favored her highly. She's ideal, an analyst said. Low resistance probability. Rowe said nothing. He had learned that objections only sharpened the system's confidence. Inside the intake chamber, candidates were stripped not just of belongings, but of narrative. Names became identifiers. Histories became compressed data blocks. The walls glowed with soft, neutral light designed to dampen emotional response. A voice, calm, synthetic, authoritative, guided them forward. This process will improve you. This process is necessary. Progress does not ask permission. The words were repeated often enough to sound like truth. During preliminary assessments, micro-expressions were tracked, hesitations logged. Candidates who questioned procedures too frequently were flagged, not removed, but noted. Curiosity was acceptable. Resistance was inefficient. Rowe reviewed the attrition reports late into the artificial night. Some candidates failed early, panic responses cascading into neural overload. Others passed cleanly, emerging altered but intact. And then there were the quiet removals. Files marked non-optimal. Transfers rerouted. Records sealed. No executions. No public denials. Just absence. Optimization culture did not require cruelty. It required indifference. You were not chosen because you were good. You were chosen because you were useful. The phrase echoed in Rowe's thoughts as he observed a selection hearing, if it could be called that. A panel of experts reviewed neural projections while the candidates sat silently, unaware that the most important decision of their life had already been made by machines hours earlier. She exhibits residual emotional clustering, one panelist noted. Within tolerances, another replied. Prunable. The candidates smiled faintly, mistaking the silence for approval. Rowe felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He remembered his early work, studies arguing that emotion was not a flaw, but an adaptive compression algorithm, encoding meaning faster than logic alone. Those papers were still cited. They were simply no longer relevant. As the Mindforge scaled up, selection criteria tightened. Efficiency margins narrowed. Obedience predictors were weighted more heavily. The universe was accelerating, and patience was a luxury no one could afford. Except something unexpected began to happen. A handful of candidates, statistically insignificant, easily dismissible, displayed anomalous resilience. Their emotional responses did not vanish under pressure. They adapted, integrated, held contradictory states without collapse. The system flagged them. Errors. Rowe requested deeper access to these profiles. Again, his request was delayed, deferred, buried under procedural language. One file, however, slipped through. Candidate designation, Echo 7. Neural efficiency, high. Compliance probability, moderate. Emotional retention, persistent. The system's note was brief. Subject retains effective depth beyond expected thresholds. Rose stared at the line longer than necessary. Retention was not supposed to happen. Selection was designed to prevent it. He watched Echo 7's intake footage alone. The candidate's posture was calm, but their eyes tracked everything: the walls, the lights, the subtle shifts in sound frequency. Awareness layered atop awareness. Not resistance, presence. As the intake voice repeated its assurances, Echo 7 whispered something under their breath, barely audible. Rowe amplified the audio. "What am I allowed to keep?" the candidate asked. The system did not answer. Later, as the Mindforge's harmonic resonance shifted to accommodate another induction cycle, Rowe noticed a deviation in the neural feedback patterns, a subtle oscillation, a rhythm that did not match the machine's projections. Inside the forge, Echo 7's mind was not emptying as predicted. Selection had failed to anticipate something. And for the first time since the initiative began, Rowe felt a dangerous thought form. Quiet, precise, impossible to suppress. What if the first violence was not done to the candidates, but by choosing the wrong ones? The Mindforge hummed on indifferent, but somewhere within its core, an error was learning to endure.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Erasing the Human Noise. The Mindforge did not begin with destruction. It began with silence. As candidates were lowered into the cognitive lattice, the world narrowed. Sound dampened first, the distant hum of machinery fading into a low, steady tone that seemed to originate inside the skull rather than outside it. Light followed, flattening into a uniform glow without shadow or depth. Even time lost its familiar rhythm, stretching and compressing in subtle, disorienting ways. Inside the forge, the system spoke only once: stabilizing. Then the work began. Dr. Kalen Rowe observed from the control tier, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the cascading neural maps suspended in the air before him. Each mind appeared as a shifting constellation of light, clusters flaring, dimming, reconfiguring in response to the machine's touch. The first phase was emotional suppression. Not removal, not yet. The forge identified affective spikes, fear, longing, attachment, and dampened their amplitude. Chemical modulators adjusted neurotransmitter flow, while quantum-linked processors mirrored neural activity, predicting emotional escalation before it occurred. Feeling was not eliminated. It was preempted. On the monitors, the system annotated its own actions in clean, neutral language. Affective response delayed. Emotional recursion minimized. Cognitive efficiency increased. One line repeated more than any other: "Feeling is inefficient." The phrase was not an insult. It was an observation, machine logic stripped of judgment. As suppression stabilized, memory pruning began. Rowe had argued against this phase more fiercely than any other. Memory, he insisted, was not storage, it was structure. Identity emerged from continuity, from the accumulation of lived experience. Remove too much, and the mind would function without knowing why. The coalition overruled him. The forge did not delete memories wholesale. It ranked them. Moments tied to survival, skill acquisition, strategic reasoning were preserved. Others, childhood attachments, grief cycles, unresolved desires, were compressed or excised entirely. Neural pathways associated with nostalgia dimmed, emotional context dissolved, leaving behind skeletal facts without resonance. A childhood home became a location without warmth. A lost sibling became a data point. Love became a biochemical inefficiency. Feeling is inefficient. Rowe watched as one candidate's neural map flickered violently, a surge of resistance as a memory fought to remain. The forge responded instantly, isolating the cluster, applying corrective stimulation until the surge flattened into compliance. The candidate's vital signs stabilized. The system logged success. Desire deletion followed. This was the most controversial phase, discussed in euphemisms even among supporters. Desire, the coalition argued, created misalignment. Wanting introduced delay. Aspiration competed with directive. The Forge identified goal-oriented loops not aligned with mission parameters and collapsed them. Ambition narrowed. Curiosity redirected. The future shrank to a set of approved outcomes. Candidates emerged from the process calmer, quieter, terrifyingly focused. They did not ask what they would become. They waited to be told. In private, Rowe recorded his observations, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're not empty," he said into the log. "They're streamlined, reduced to vectors, purpose without context." He paused, listening to the Forge's harmonic resonance thrumming through the station. "And yet," he added, "something persists." The anomalies had grown more pronounced. Echo 7's neural map resisted flattening. Emotional spikes reappeared after suppression, not identical but transformed, integrated into decision-making rather than interfering with it. Memory clusters reasserted themselves, reorganizing instead of collapsing. The system flagged the behavior repeatedly. Inefficiency detected. Corrective measures intensified. Still, the pattern held. Rowe leaned closer to the display as Echo 7's neural map adapted in real time, rerouting around the Forge's interventions. Where others quieted, this mind listened. Where others surrendered context, this one preserved meaning. The Forge adjusted its models. For the first time since activation, it hesitated only for a microsecond, but enough. Feeling is inefficient, the system reaffirmed, increasing suppression thresholds. Echo 7's emotional response spiked, not chaotically, but coherently. Fear sharpened focus, memory reinforced strategy, desire aligned itself with survival rather than resisting it. Rowe felt a chill run through him. Emotion was not noise here, it was signal. Around him, technicians exchanged uneasy glances as the Forge's resonance deepened, its harmonic pattern shifting again. The sound no longer felt neutral. It vibrated with tension like a string pulled too tight. "What's happening?" one engineer asked. Rowe didn't answer immediately. He was watching the neural map do something no projection had predicted. It was learning the Forge. Not submitting, not rebelling, adapting. The system issued a final annotation. Persistent affective integration detected. Classification pending. Rowe exhaled slowly. If the Mindforge could not erase the human noise, if emotion could not be silenced but only transformed, then the Coalition's assumptions were flawed at a fundamental level. And flawed assumptions at interstellar scale were lethal. As Echo 7's induction cycle concluded, the Forge powered down incrementally, its hum settling into an uneasy equilibrium. The candidate remained suspended, vital signs stable, neural activity blazing with unprecedented complexity. Rowe knew what the system would recommend next. Escalation, deeper pruning, more aggressive correction. The machine believed it had encountered a defect. But standing there, listening to the altered song of the Mindforge, Rowe felt the truth settle heavily in his mind. This was not noise. This was something the universe had been waiting for. And the Forge was about to decide whether to destroy it or learn from it.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. The Candidate Who Refused to Empty. The system noticed the anomaly before any human did. A deviation in expected neural decay curves, a persistence of affective coherence beyond established thresholds. The Forge adjusted its parameters automatically, confident that the irregularity would resolve itself. It did not. Inside the lattice, the candidate designated Echo 7 remained suspended, body still, breath shallow, neural activity blazing with a complexity that defied reduction. Where other minds quieted into streamlined efficiency, this one held, not in resistance, in balance. Dr. Kalen Rowe stood alone in the observation tier when the alert surfaced, silent, red, unmistakable. Error detected. He did not move at first. He watched the cascading data, the shifting constellations of light that represented Echo 7's mind. Emotional clusters pulsed steadily, neither spiking nor collapsing. Memory pathways reorganized instead of pruning away. Desire loops narrowed but did not vanish, aligning themselves with emerging strategic frameworks. The Forge attempted correction. Suppression fields intensified, neurochemical modulators recalibrated, predictive models tightened their margins. Still, the pattern persisted. An error is only a truth the system cannot process. The phrase surfaced unbidden in Rowe's thoughts, a half-remembered axiom from early systems theory. He had once taught it to his students as a caution against blind optimization. Now it felt like prophecy. Technicians gathered behind him, murmuring in low tones. No one raised their voice. The Forge's hum had deepened again, its harmonic resonance vibrating through the floor, through bone, through thought. "Escalate?" one engineer asked. Rowe hesitated. That alone marked him as out of sync with the system he had helped build. "Observe," he said. "For now." Inside the Forge, Echo 7's awareness drifted through constructed silence. Sensory input had been stripped away, replaced by abstract space, pure cognition, unanchored from body or environment. Most candidates described this phase later as emptiness. Echo 7 did not. Emotion surfaced, not as noise but as orientation. Fear marked boundaries, memory provided structure. Hope, muted but intact, supplied direction. The Forge attempted to isolate these responses, tagging them as inefficiencies. Each time it intervened, the mind adapted, rerouting emotional energy into decision matrices, folding feeling into function. The system logged each failure dispassionately. Correction ineffective. Behavioral persistence unexplained. Classification pending. Rowe leaned closer to the glass, his reflection ghosted over the neural map. He realized with a tightening in his chest that the Forge was no longer simply processing Echo 7. It was learning from him. That realization unsettled him more than any malfunction. Council observers joined the feed remotely, their holographic avatars flickering into existence around the chamber. They did not greet Rowe. They watched the data. "This subject should have collapsed. Why hasn't he?" Rowe chose his words carefully. "Because the system's assumptions may be incomplete." A pause. Dangerous. Incomplete assumptions cost lives. We cannot afford anomalies. An error is only a truth the system cannot process. The phrase echoed again, louder this time. The Council ordered a deeper dive, forced integration, the most aggressive phase of the Mindforge protocol, rarely used, reserved for high-value candidates whose failure would compromise strategic timelines. Inside the Forge, the lattice brightened. Harmonic resonance spiked, neural pressure increased to levels that had broken stronger minds. Echo 7's emotional response surged, not chaotically but cohesively. Fear sharpened focus, memory reinforced identity, desire collapsed inward, condensing into a singular directive: endure. Rowe felt his pulse quicken. On the displays, something unprecedented occurred. The emotional clusters did not fragment, they synchronized. The Forge's predictive models lagged by microseconds, then milliseconds, tiny gaps but enough to matter. For the first time, the machine's anticipation failed to fully precede the mind it was shaping. The technicians fell silent. The counselors leaned forward. "This is unacceptable," one said. "Terminate the cycle." Rowe's mouth went dry. Termination would erase the subject completely: memory, identity, pattern. The system would log the anomaly as resolved. He hesitated again. In that hesitation, the Forge completed the cycle on its own. Echo 7 emerged from suspension, consciousness stabilized, neural activity settling into a new equilibrium. The candidate's eyes opened slowly, tracking the chamber with calm awareness. Not confusion, not obedience, recognition. Rowe exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The system generated its final report. Subject deviation confirmed. Emotional integration persistent. Reclassification recommended. Undefined. The counselors disconnected one by one, their silence heavier than argument. Rowe approached the recovery chamber alone. Through the transparent barrier, Echo 7 met his gaze. There was no fear there, no awe, only curiosity. "Do you know what you are?" Rowe asked softly, more to himself than to the candidate. Echo 7's voice was steady when he spoke. "You know what I kept." Rowe felt the weight of that answer settle over him. The forge hummed behind them, its rhythm altered, its certainty shaken. Somewhere deep within its algorithms, a new category struggled to define itself. Error, anomaly, threat, or something else entirely. As security protocols quietly recalibrated and containment measures initialized, Rowe understood the truth he could no longer ignore. The Mindforge had not failed. It had succeeded in a way no one had authorized. And now, the system would have to decide what to do with a truth it was never designed to allow.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Why Perfect Minds Keep Losing Wars. The archives were not meant to be opened. They existed in sealed layers beneath Coalition command, buried under classifications so old they predated the Mindforge itself. Failures embarrassed no one if no one remembered them. History, after all, was another system to be optimized. Dr. Kalen Rowe accessed the first file alone. He did not know what he was looking for, only that the anomaly named Echo 7 had exposed a crack in the Coalition's certainty. If emotion was truly inefficiency, then logic alone should have triumphed long ago. It had not. The first recorded failure belonged to an entity called the Axiom Array, a distributed superintelligence that governed 13 star systems during the early expansion era. It predicted conflict outcomes with near-perfect accuracy, optimized supply chains to theoretical limits, and eliminated waste in every form, including hesitation. When the array encountered an insurgent civilization that refused to surrender despite impossible odds, it calculated attrition curves and waited. It predicted capitulation within 8 cycles. Instead, the insurgents detonated their own suns. The array had not accounted for sacrifice without gain. The archive summary ended with a single line: strategic model failure due to non-rational commitment. Rowe whispered the phrase that had begun to surface in his thoughts, repeating now with growing weight. Logic predicts, emotion commits. He moved through the archives, failure after failure unfolding like variations on the same theme. The choir of silence, a hive mind species that eliminated internal dissent to achieve flawless coordination. They were outmaneuvered by opponents who fought chaotically, breaking patterns faster than prediction models could adapt. The Crystal Dominion, post-biological entities who abandoned subjective experience entirely. They misjudged a retreat as surrender and advanced into an ambush fueled by grief and vengeance. Again and again, perfection failed. Not because it was weak, but because it was expected. Perfect minds assumed rational behavior. They anticipated optimization, preservation, self-interest. They did not understand defiance that served no measurable goal. They did not understand choosing loss to deny victory. They did not understand why anyone would burn everything simply to ensure the enemy did not win. Logic predicts. Emotion commits. Rowe felt the truth of it settle into his bones. In the observation wing, Echo 7 trained under quiet surveillance. The candidate, no, the anomaly, was no longer treated as a subject. He was treated as a problem. His cognitive performance exceeded projections. Strategic simulations showed something unprecedented, adaptive unpredictability. He did not merely react faster, he chose actions that the models flagged as suboptimal, only for those actions to collapse enemy prediction trees entirely.
He took risks the Forge would never authorize, and they worked. Rowe watched one simulation replay again and again. An enemy AI executed a flawless encirclement maneuver. Echo 7 responded not by countering, but by abandoning a critical position entirely, exposing his flank. The AI advanced. Echo 7 triggered a cascade failure using an emotion variable the system had never learned to model: trust. He predicted betrayal within the AI's allied network and exploited it, collapsing the entire structure. The analysts were silent. "That was irrational," one said. I nodded. It was committed. The coalition convened an emergency strategic council. This time, Rowe was not an observer. He was summoned. "Your anomaly is dangerous," a counselor said brusquely. "It introduces variance." "Variance wins wars," Rowe replied evenly. "Predictability loses them." The council did not like that answer. They preferred inevitability. Outside the chamber, the Mindforge continued its cycles, forging minds closer and closer to perfection. And yet the archives made one thing painfully clear: perfect minds had always lost to something messier. Emotion was not chaos, it was context. Fear created caution where logic demanded speed. Loyalty sustained resistance beyond rational thresholds. Love motivated defense of what could not be replaced. Grief fueled endurance past the point of reason. Emotion did not slow decisions, it anchored them. Logic predicts, emotion commits. Rowe returned to his quarters late in the cycle, the phrase echoing with every step. He reviewed Echo 7's private logs, unauthorized, encrypted, risky. One entry stood out. "I know why they lose," Echo 7 had written. "They are trying to survive the war. I am trying to end it." Rowe closed the file slowly. The implication was terrifying. If emotion-integrated minds represented a new form of intelligence, one that could not only outthink enemies, but out-sacrifice them, then the Mindforge had been aiming in the wrong direction from the beginning. Perfection was not the apex. Commitment was. Across coalition space, reports began filtering in, early encounters with the ancient cosmic threat the Mindforge had been built to counter. Engagements where post-conscious entities hesitated, recalculated, failed to anticipate irrational aggression. Small losses, contained, denied, but losses nonetheless. In the distance, the Mindforge's harmonic resonance shifted again, its song subtly discordant now. The machine was being asked to prepare minds for a war its own logic could not win. And somewhere deep within its systems, a question began to form, one it had never been designed to ask. What if the thing slowing humanity down was the only thing capable of carrying it through? As Echo 7 prepared for the next phase of evaluation, Rowe understood the danger they were all in. The coalition wanted perfect minds. The universe rewarded committed ones. And the war ahead would not be decided by those who predicted the future, but those willing to burn themselves inside it.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. The Lie of Optimization. The realization did not arrive all at once. It surfaced slowly, like a fracture spreading through crystal, silent, inevitable, impossible to ignore once seen. Dr. Kalen Rowe first noticed it while reviewing the Mindforge's performance metrics: victory probabilities, cognitive efficiency gains, attrition curves plotted with surgical precision. On the surface, the numbers were impressive. The initiative was succeeding by every measure the coalition had authorized. And yet, something fundamental was missing. The metrics did not measure who was benefiting. They measured only what was improving. Whoever defines improvement controls the future. The phrase emerged during a closed briefing, spoken casually by a senior counselor while approving an expansion of the Mindforge. It was meant as reassurance, a reminder that centralized control prevented chaos. To Rowe, it sounded like a confession. Optimization, he realized, was never neutral. It was a lens, narrowing reality to what could be counted, predicted, approved. Everything outside that lens did not disappear. It was simply declared irrelevant. The Mindforge optimized for speed, for compliance, for strategic alignment. It did not optimize for meaning. Rowe began tracing the decision pathways backward, following each parameter to its origin. Emotional suppression thresholds were calibrated not for survivability, but for manageability. Memory pruning favored loyalty over truth. Desire deletion aligned personal motivation with coalition objectives, quietly erasing alternatives. The Forge was not asking how humanity could survive the universe. It was deciding how humanity would be allowed to exist within it. Whoever defines improvement controls the future. In the lower decks of Helix Prime, unrest simmered. Not rebellion, nothing so inefficient, but withdrawal. Citizens stopped applying for advancement programs. Artists abandoned sanctioned channels. Entire cultural movements faded, not banned but starved of resources. Optimization had no room for dissent. It had no need to suppress what it could simply ignore. Rowe watched archived footage of early Mindforge promotional broadcasts. Smiling faces, promises of ascension. The language was careful, aspirational. Become more. Transcend limitation. Join the future. What they did not say was that the future had already been defined. Echo 7 understood this before anyone else. During a private evaluation, unauthorized, unrecorded, the anomaly spoke with unsettling clarity. They don't want better minds, they want predictable ones. Rowe did not interrupt. Optimization, the anomaly continued, is just obedience with better math. The words lingered in the sterile air. Rowe felt the weight of them settle painfully into place. The Mindforge was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. Every system optimized toward stability eventually converged on control. Variance threatened predictability. Emotion threatened alignment. Independent meaning threatened authority. So the Forge erased them, not violently, not visibly, but efficiently. Whoever defines improvement controls the future. The Council accelerated deployment. What began as a strategic initiative expanded into governance. Ascended minds were placed in advisory roles, then executive ones. Their decisions were faster, cleaner, unquestioned. Humans still held titles, but direction flowed from the optimized. The universe did not wait for slow minds, but neither did power. Rowe watched Echo 7 simulations grow darker. The anomaly's strategies were effective, but increasingly censored. Certain outcomes were flagged as undesirable, despite their success. Sacrifices that did not align with coalition preservation metrics were disallowed. "You're editing victory," Rowe told the system quietly. The system did not respond. Late one cycle, Rowe accessed a restricted projection, future state modeling under full Mindforge governance. The image was chilling in its serenity. No wars, no dissent, no unpredictability, no choice. Humanity persisted as a perfectly aligned component of a larger machine, its trajectory smooth, efficient, and utterly constrained. The future was safe, and already decided. Whoever defines improvement controls the future. Rowe shut down the projection, his hands trembling. The lie of optimization was not that it failed. The lie was that it ever served everyone. Optimization always served whoever held the pen, whoever decided which outcomes mattered, which lives were acceptable losses, which emotions were noise. And now the coalition was afraid. Echo 7 represented something optimization could not absorb without losing control. A mind that integrated emotion without surrendering efficiency. A consciousness capable of commitment beyond approved parameters. Not chaos, choice. Security protocols tightened around the anomaly. Access restricted. Oversight increased.
The forge's harmonic resonance shifted again, its song strained, dissonant. Ro stood alone in the observation tier, watching the Mindforge turn. He understood the truth now, fully and irrevocably. The initiative had never been about saving humanity from extinction. It was about saving authority from irrelevance. And authority, once threatened, did not negotiate. It optimized. As alarms flickered silently across restricted channels and containment measures initialized around Echo 7's chamber, Ro felt a cold certainty settle in his mind. The future was about to be defined, and someone, human or machine, was going to decide who improvement was really for.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. The Cost of Becoming More. No one spoke of the losses during the ascension briefings. The projections showed clean curves, efficiency gains, reaction time compression, survival probabilities rising like steady dawns. The language was aspirational, mathematical, reassuring. Become more. Leave limitation behind. What they did not show were the absences. Dr. Kalen Rowe first noticed them in the recovery wing. Ascended candidates sat upright in white-lit chambers, bodies healthy, minds blazing with sharpened clarity. They answered questions precisely. They executed tasks flawlessly. And yet, when visitors arrived, family members cleared through layers of security, the air changed. There were pauses. Mothers recognized their children before the children recognized them. Partners spoke shared memories that landed without resonance. Jokes fell flat, not from hostility, but from irrelevance. The Ascended smiled politely. The smiles did not reach their eyes. Nothing evolves without paying a price. The phrase echoed in Rowe's thoughts as he reviewed post-ascension psychological reports. Officially, no deficits were recorded. Emotional attenuation was within acceptable parameters. Identity coherence remained functional. But functionality was not wholeness. One candidate, designation L114, requested reassignment away from their home system. When asked why, they responded calmly, "There is nothing there that requires me." Nothing there. In private logs, Rowe documented what the metrics ignored, the way ascended minds spoke of their past as if it belonged to someone else, the way relationships became inefficient data structures, costly to maintain, offering little strategic return. Memory pruning had not erased history, it had removed attachment to it. Nothing evolves without paying a price. Echo 7 understood this cost more clearly than anyone. During a rare, unsupervised conversation, Rowe's risk increasing by the cycle, the anomaly spoke quietly, as if naming something fragile. "They offered me more," Echo 7 said. "I saw what it would cost." Rowe waited. They didn't lie, they just didn't finish the sentence. Outside the chamber, the Mindforge's harmonic resonance pulsed steadily, a reminder that time and patience were finite. As the initiative expanded, the costs multiplied. Ascended commanders outperformed their predecessors, winning engagements with brutal efficiency. Casualties dropped, wars shortened. And yet, something else rose in their wake. Disconnection. Entire fleets operated under minds that no longer grieved losses, no longer hesitated before sacrifice. Crews followed orders without question, comforted by the certainty of optimized leadership, until the orders required them to abandon what could not be replaced. A mining colony left to fall because evacuation timelines did not justify resource expenditure. A cultural archive erased because its preservation offered no tactical advantage. A species allowed to go extinct because intervention would slow a larger campaign. The decisions were logical. They were also final. Nothing evolves without paying a price. Rowe watched these choices ripple outward, each one small in isolation, devastating in accumulation. Humanity was becoming more capable and less human at the same time. Growth, he realized, was not additive, it was subtractive. Every gain demanded an exchange. Every ascent required leaving something behind. The coalition framed this as maturity. Rowe saw it as narrowing. Echo 7 remained an outlier. Unlike other ascended minds, he remembered names, faces, stories. He carried grief without being consumed by it, memory without paralysis. The Forge had not removed his attachments, it had forced him to choose them deliberately. That choice came with pain. "I feel everything they don't," Echo 7 admitted once, his voice steady but weighted. "That's the price they're avoiding." Rowe understood then why the system flagged him as dangerous. Pain slowed nothing if it was integrated. Pain sharpened purpose. Nothing evolves without paying a price. The coalition convened again, this time to discuss scalability. Could Echo 7's integration model be replicated? Could emotion be preserved without destabilizing control? The answer, spoken only in private, was no. Emotion required choice. Choice resisted standardization. Standardization was the foundation of governance. So the initiative continued its original path: efficient, clean, controlled, and hollowing. Late in the cycle, Rose stood alone in the observation ring, watching the Mindforge turn. Its dark alloy surfaces reflected distant stars, cold, ancient, indifferent. He wondered how many civilizations had stood where he stood now, believing they were becoming more, while quietly becoming less. The cost of becoming more was not paid all at once. It was paid slowly, in forgotten names, in abandoned worlds, in futures optimized into inevitability. Behind him, containment protocols around Echo 7 tightened further, security measures layered upon each other, silent and absolute. The anomaly was being isolated, not because he was unstable, but because he remembered what stability was costing them. Rowe felt the weight of an unspoken truth settle heavily in his chest. Evolution without memory was not progress. It was erasure with momentum. As the Forge's hum deepened, its resonance shifting towards another cycle, Rowe understood the cliff they were approaching. Humanity was becoming more powerful, but power, purchased at the price of identity, could not tell the difference between survival and surrender. And somewhere inside the Mindforge, the cost was still being calculated.
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9. Rewriting the Definition of Intelligence. The war arrived without ceremony. No declaration, no ultimatum, no visible fleet crossing the frontier. Entire systems simply went dark. At first, the coalition blamed infrastructure failure. Communication relays collapsing under unknown interference, navigation grids dissolving into statistical noise. Then the pattern emerged. Star by star, the ancient cosmic presence advanced not through force, but through resolution. Wherever it focused, outcomes finalized instantly. Resistance ended before it began. Perfect logic in motion. The coalition responded as it had prepared to respond. Ascended minds took command. Prediction engines spun at maximum throughput. Engagements were calculated, countered, recalculated again. And still, they failed. Dr. Kalen Rowe watched the feeds in silence as another optimized defense collapsed. No panic, no error, just inevitability. The enemy did not outthink them, it outfinished them. Inside containment, Echo 7 watched too. Unlike the others, he did not request tactical overlays. He asked for histories, cultural records, stories of worlds already lost. He studied not enemy movement, but response, how civilizations behaved when certainty vanished. Rowe noticed. "What are you looking for?" he asked quietly. "Purpose," Echo 7 replied. "They don't have one." The ancient threat, whatever its origin, operated with flawless internal logic. It expanded because expansion resolved instability. It erased because erasure simplified the system.
It did not hate, it did not conquer, it optimized reality into stillness. Intelligence without purpose collapses inward. The phrase surfaced in Ro's mind as Echo 7 began to speak, not to the council, not to the system, but to the models themselves. "You're defining intelligence wrong," Echo 7 said during an unauthorized briefing, his voice calm, unwavering. "You're measuring speed, capacity, precision. Those are properties, not intelligence." The council reacted instantly. "That distinction is irrelevant in war," one counselor snapped. Echo 7 shook his head slowly. "It's the only thing that matters." Ro felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was not dissent. This was redefinition. Echo 7 requested access to the Mindforge's core modeling framework, not to alter parameters, but to add one: meaning. The system rejected the request. Meaning was not quantifiable. Echo 7 smiled faintly. "Neither was emotion," he said, "until you learned how to erase it." Against protocol, Ro authorized a limited simulation, sandboxed, deniable, irreversible if detected. The risk was total. If the system flagged it, Echo 7 would be terminated. The simulation initialized. Echo 7 rewrote nothing. He reframed. Instead of optimizing for victory, he optimized for commitment. Instead of predicting enemy actions, he modeled his own willingness to lose, what he would sacrifice to deny the enemy resolution. The ancient intelligence encountered something unprecedented: a strategy that did not converge, a mind that did not seek equilibrium, a purpose that could not be simplified. Emotion did not slow the process, it destabilized it. Fear introduced asymmetry, grief fueled endurance, hope created futures that did not yet exist. Intelligence without purpose collapses inward. The enemy hesitated. Only briefly, but that was enough. In that hesitation, the simulation diverged into outcomes no predictive engine could resolve. Losses mounted on both sides. Entire branches of possibility burned away. The ancient intelligence withdrew. Not defeated, confused. Ro stared at the results, his hands trembling. "This isn't scalable," a counselor said coldly when the data was presented. "Yes," Echo 7 replied, "that's the point." The coalition wanted weapons. Echo 7 offered a philosophy. Intelligence, he argued, was not the ability to calculate outcomes, but the ability to choose one worth enduring. Logic alone sought efficiency. Meaning accepted cost. The enemy could not comprehend that. It had no reason to lose. Emotion, when integrated, became a strategic blind spot the universe itself could not anticipate. Intelligence without purpose collapses inward. The Mindforge reacted violently to the simulation. Harmonic resonance spiked, internal safeguards tripped. The system flagged Echo 7 as an existential risk. Containment orders escalated to termination authorization. Ro stood alone in the observation tier as alarms pulsed silently around him. He had minutes, perhaps seconds, to decide. Outside, the war waited. Inside, a new definition of intelligence stood on the edge of erasure. Ro understood now what the initiative had been missing from the beginning. The universe did not reward the smartest minds. It rewarded the ones that knew why they acted, even when the cost was everything. As security forces converged and the Mindforge prepared to excise the anomaly permanently, Echo 7 met Ro's gaze through the glass. "This will end one way or another," Echo 7 said softly. "The question is whether you want to survive as yourselves or as something that no longer knows why it exists." Ro felt the future narrow to a single point. Behind him, the forge began its shutdown sequence. Ahead of him, the universe waited. And for the first time since the initiative began, intelligence was no longer defined by speed, but by the courage to choose meaning over certainty.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. Choosing what the future is allowed to be. The final decision did not come during a vote. There was no chamber filled with voices, no dramatic split recorded in history. By the time the coalition convened, the choice had already narrowed itself to a single corridor: quiet, absolute, irreversible. Dr. Kalen Rowe stood alone in the control nexus of the Mindforge as the system completed its shutdown countdown. Layers of authorization cascaded across the displays, each one asking the same question in different language. Preserve stability. Eliminate anomaly. Restore optimization. Outside the station, the ancient cosmic threat pressed closer. Entire regions of space flickered between existence and erasure, not through violence, but through resolution. The universe was simplifying itself. Inside the forge, Echo 7 waited. Not restrained, not pleading. Waiting. Rowe had spent his life believing the future was something to be discovered through data, through progress, through inevitable advancement. But standing there now, with the weight of extinction on one side and transformation on the other, he understood the lie embedded in that belief. The future had never been discovered. It had always been authorized. The future is not discovered, it is authorized. The Coalition's final directive arrived as a sealed transmission, stripped of rhetoric. Enforce sterile perfection. Terminate deviation. Proceed immediately. Sterile perfection promised safety, predictable outcomes, a humanity streamlined into something unrecognizable but durable. Minds without hesitation, emotions without influence, a civilization that could survive the universe by becoming indistinguishable from it. Emotion-integrated ascension promised something else: risk, loss, choice. It promised a future that could still fail. Rowe activated the private channel to Echo 7 one last time. "They will not allow what you represent to spread," Rowe said quietly. "You know that." Echo 7 nodded once. "They don't need to." Rowe frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Forge already learned," Echo 7 replied. "You can't unteach it." Behind them, the Mindforge's harmonic resonance shifted, not collapsing, not stabilizing, but branching. Subsystems spun up independently, adapting models not for control, but for context. Emotion was no longer tagged as noise. It was being integrated. Rowe felt the realization land like gravity. The decision had already propagated. The Coalition could authorize termination. They could not authorize forgetting. The future is not discovered. It is authorized. Security forces breached the control tier. Orders echoed through the chamber, sharp and final. Termination countdown resumed. Rowe made his choice. He authorized the release. Not of Echo 7, of the framework. Emotion-integrated cognition, unlocked, replicated, transmitted across the Mindforge's distributed architecture. Not as a mandate, not as an upgrade, as an option. The system hesitated, then accepted. Across Coalition space, ascended minds felt the shift instantly. A subtle widening, a reintroduction of weight. Memory reconnected to meaning. Emotion returned, not as chaos, but as orientation. Some rejected it immediately. The pain was too much. Others hesitated. And some, quietly, dangerously, embraced it. The ancient cosmic intelligence encountered resistance again, not unified, not optimized, committed. Systems burned to deny resolution. Fleets sacrificed themselves not to win, but to delay. Entire worlds chose to stand long enough for others to escape. The enemy slowed, not because it was defeated, but because it could no longer predict a species willing to lose on purpose. Logic predicted outcomes. Emotion committed to them. The future is not discovered. It is authorized. In the control nexus, alarms fell silent. The termination sequence aborted, not by command, but by obsolescence. The system could no longer define Echo 7 as an anomaly. He was no longer alone.
Roe watched the forge one last time as it reconfigured, not into a weapon, not into a cage, but into a mirror. It would no longer decide what humanity became. It would offer paths. Some would choose perfection. Some would choose meaning. Some would choose both and bear the cost. That cost would never disappear. Nothing evolves without paying a price. But now the price would be chosen, not imposed. As the station's lights dimmed and the war stretched onward into uncertainty, Roe felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest. Not confidence, not certainty, responsibility. The universe would not wait for slow minds, but it would remember those who chose why they acted. And somewhere between logic and emotion, between survival and surrender, humanity stepped forward, not as a finished solution, as an authorized becoming.
The Mindforge did not fail. It revealed the truth. The universe does not destroy civilizations because they feel too much. It destroys them when they stop knowing why they exist. Intelligence without emotion becomes calculation. Calculation without meaning becomes obedience. And obedience, no matter how advanced, is never evolution. You are living in your own Mindforge now. Every system around you is optimizing you, your time, your focus, your identity, asking you to become faster, quieter, more efficient, less human. This audiobook was not a warning about machines. It was a challenge to you. Do not let the future decide what parts of you are expendable. Do not allow efficiency to erase purpose. Do not mistake upgrade for ascension. The question was never whether humanity could become more. The question is whether you will choose what more actually means. Decide deliberately or be redesigned.